I'm Derrick Grootboom. I am a human rights activist. Since the age of 16, I became involved in the campaign for human rights in South Africa in the fight against apartheid during the 1980s, specifically 1983, when I became the chairperson of the Duiselsdorp Youth Organization, 20 kilometers outside of Oudtshoorn. I've ever since been involved in human rights campaign, and that led to my imprisonment at the age of 19, which took me to Robben Island, where I served part of my 7-year sentence against apartheid and was released after 5.5 years of imprisonment, the 11th of April 1991. And during my imprisonment, I completed my high school studies and started with my university studies. And that came about because, or should I say, because I was encouraged by our former President Thabo Mbeki's father, whom I met on the island, Governor Mbeki, saying to me, when the Communists took me to B section, that while I'm in prison, I must study, because the 7-year sentence that I was serving, he said, would not be completed because I would be released before the 7-year sentence is finished, because by that time we would have attained freedom, was his words, and we would need qualified people to administer this democratic state after apartheid. So that's why I continued my studies and started with my university degree studies, and was released while I was busy with my first year at UNISA. That time I was doing a B admin degree because I wanted to work in government administration in the New South Africa. However, after my release, we met as newly released prisoners at Cowley House in Woodstock, and we received, amazingly, a visit of Comrade Chris Hani, who was the commander from Umkhonto weSizwe, and he asked us all to return to the towns we come from and to go and campaign and work to establish a constituent assembly, to write the Constitution of South Africa, and to have our first democratic elections. Sadly, he died, was killed, assassinated, and that led to us having our first election date, the 27th of April 1994. And so that was the part of my history which prepared me as a human rights activist for my work later, having completed 2 degrees, a B.Juris degree, and also a master's degree in law, for my work as a public prosecutor. And I've been a public prosecutor since 2001, the 1st of November 2001, starting in the Northern Cape town of Springbok. And I've ever since been a prosecutor, working in the district courts, in the regional courts, and I've also had the opportunity to work and sit in the High Court as an assessor in the Western Cape High Court, and also argue in the Constitutional Court. So this prepared me, that experience from 16 years old, to be able to see how human rights and the Constitution work for our people. I'm still working in the regional court, doing mainly cases of murder, rape, fraud, in excess of 500,000 rand, complex cases. And what really concern me in my work is that I'm realizing more and more how important it is to have our people to own the Constitution of South Africa. Because if they don't own the Constitution of South Africa, then the Constitution cannot mean anything to them. And if the Constitution doesn't mean anything to them, then we are in trouble. Because we are on our way to a lawless world in South Africa if the people don't own the Constitution. And sadly, the persons who are mainly affected in that their rights are infringed every day are mainly, and you can go to any court in South Africa. If you go to any court in South Africa, you will see the people who are there in the courtrooms, in the corridors, waiting outside, especially now with COVID-19, are poor Black and African persons. It's rare that you see white persons coming to court for cases such as murder, rape, theft, and so on. Yes, of course, when it comes to fraud, big amounts of money, then you have white persons appearing in court. But when it comes to violent crime, the people who suffer in this country are the poor masses. Their rights are infringed every day. And what is more saddening is that the staff working inside the Justice Department, the clerks, the public prosecutors, the magistrates, the judges, many of them, as it appears to me, do not own the Constitution themselves. They don't live the Constitution themselves. And it seems like we have just gone from apartheid into a new apartheid, where in this new apartheid, Black and poor people are the ones who are still suffering, together with poor white persons. And that nothing changed. The human rights culture that the South African Constitution and the government needs to support, to help, to exist in this country, that culture is non-existent. We are still living the apartheid culture in the so-called new South Africa. South Africa has never become new. We just went on and continue to live the same type of culture and practices. And it's getting worse because we have population explosion, we have infrastructure, maintenance is going down, we have mushrooming of informal settlements. And I don't understand how we can not be alarmed when a person lives in a shack. Because if you live in a shack, and in the conditions that people live in shacks, you cannot speak about human dignity. Those people, you can't think that those people are living a life of human dignity, or that their human dignity that's inherent to every person, that is being respected. When sewage is running down the streets, people come out of those environments into the courtroom, into the courthouses, into the corridors, doors of justice, and then they experience even there that they are not respected, their dignity is not respected. And why is this happening? Because people don't own the Constitution. And when I say people don't own the Constitution, they don't know how to use the Constitution. They don't know how to make it real for themselves. That's why they continue to live and live in worse conditions sometimes than what they were in when they lived during apartheid. So what I'm involved in is to try and see how can we have people to own the Constitution. And I myself, I'm tomorrow in court, in the labor court, fighting for my constitutional right to fair labor practice. Because that's a right. And that is showing that I am using this Constitution. And that is what I hope in this interview I'll be able to help people to understand how they can start owning the Constitution and how the government can support programs to have people to own the Constitution. Because, to make an example, I've grown up to have the knowledge that there are people who own motor cars, but they can't drive it. They don't know how to drive it. They always have to ask somebody else to come and drive their car for them because they don't know how to drive it. And that's the same with our Constitution. This Constitution, it is ours. We own it, but we can't drive it. It means nothing to us. We always have to ask somebody else to help us. And lawyers are expensive. When a poor person's human rights are infringed, how do he or she get to a lawyer to help him or her to protect his or her human rights? Basic human rights. I guess the Human Rights Commission and all these institutions, they should be in court every day fighting for people to realize their human dignity, where they live, where they work. But we don't see the Human Rights Commission in court every day fighting for people, helping them to understand and realize the fruits of freedom, which is the rights in the Constitution. So that is my concern. That is what I'm busy with. What I've learned in my experience as a public prosecutor is that it is very hard to be a black person or African in this country. If you do not have qualifications and skills, it's very difficult to get it. And when you have it, it's very difficult to get employment. And if you want to start your own business, to knock on the doors of the banks is a fruitless exercise for the majority of black people in this country to make their own thing because they need finance. But the finance is tied up in the banks. And the banks are owned mainly by white persons who don't want to release these funds into the public domain so that black people can live out their ideas. And I mean, I know, I'm an entrepreneur myself. A business idea must be incubated. You must throw money behind it and grow it and make it to be successful. And unfortunately, black people don't have cash. They don't have money. So their business ideas can never come to fruition. You will find in towns mainly, in former white towns, city centers, you'll find that banks support white businesses. For example, you have 3 or 4 furniture shops in one street. But if you as a black person go with an idea for a business to start, then they will tell you, but there are already so many other businesses like this, like your business. Why must we put money behind you? But they do it mainly for white persons. How come? Go around any town and you'll see it. How many of the same coffee shops and bars there are? And who funds those coffee shops? Who incubates them? Are the banks. But you don't find that as much for black persons. And so, access to business and to be able to do your own thing, that right that you must have and that must be realized, that is also absent. And how can we have persons, individuals in our community, to use the Constitution to realize their potential, to create that equal society where they can, as equals, participate in growing the economy of this country. One of the good things this past month, the government again started distributing these booklets and the Constitution at government offices, and I hope that people pick up these constitutions and these booklets and take it home, so that every house in South Africa must have at least a constitution. Because what does the law do? What does the Constitution do? The Constitution creates certainty. That's why we have a Constitution. In the olden days, as people would say, we were living in the jungle. And the one who was more powerful, the one with the biggest gun, would rule. But in a society where there are laws and a constitution, you have certainty that even if you are not strong and powerful, that you have equal opportunity with any other person. I just want to read, for example, introduction to what is a constitution from this booklet, because I think it says it so beautiful. A constitution is a body of fundamental principles according to which a state is to be governed. It sets out how all elements of government are organized and contains rules about what power is wielded, who wields it, and over whom it is wielded in the governing of a country. It can be seen as a kind of contract between those in power and those who are subjected to this power. It defines the rights and the duties of citizens and the mechanisms that keep those in power in check. Now, that is what it is. It's a contract. But now, if you don't know what your part of the contract is and what the part of the other party is to the contract, then you can't enforce the contract. You must know what is the agreement. And the Constitution is that. It's a contract. But how many individuals in South Africa know this contract that they have with one another and with the government? What their rights are, what their duties are in terms of this contract? This is the social Bible that should be in every house. That every people, as they go and read the Bible every night and pray and discuss it, so they must read at least a section or a paragraph in the homes and discuss it. What does it mean? Where are the institutions that can help us to realize this? People must discuss the Constitution in the bars, in their houses, in the churches, in the youth organizations, everywhere. At least once a day, we must look at the Constitution, because this is, when you go out of your house, you are going to run into part of that contract. Even in your house, how parents treat their children, this Constitution is part of that contract. How children treat their parents, how teachers and learners should be with one another, it's in this contract. How youth should be in their organizations with one another, how boys and girls should behave to one another, how men and women should behave to one another. This is the contract. And why we have this mayhem in this country is because we do not keep our eye on the ball, on the contract. We do not live out the conditions of this contract, which will make life more certain, and everybody will know what I can do to another and what another can do to me, what I cannot do to another and what another cannot do to me. There is not enough police or army, soldiers, to keep us safe in this country. What can keep us safe is if all of us can live by this constitution. That can keep us safe. We've seen now in July with the riots in Johannesburg and in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban, that the police are not enough. The army is not enough. It is only when we learn, discuss, live, eat, sleep this constitution and start owning it and it becoming part of us, and we have this human rights culture to be established not only in South Africa but throughout the world, that we will have peace in South Africa, that we will have prosperity in South Africa, that we will have peace in Africa, that we will have prosperity in Africa, that we will have peace in the world, that we will have prosperity in the world. It is when we make it our duty to establish a human rights culture. This is the religion that encompasses all other religions. You can be a Muslim and you can live a human rights culture. You can be a Christian and you can live a human rights culture. You can be a Buddhist and you can live a human rights culture. This Constitution of South Africa, which sets out to have such a culture to be established in South Africa, what are we doing every day to make sure that that culture starts to exist? And that we do away with the apartheid culture, where people don't care for one another, where people hurt one another, where people kill one another, where people don't care for one another. That is what we had in apartheid. Why do we still have it here? When is South Africa to become this human rights culture society? When is South Africa going to become the new South Africa? When are we going to make this real, this constitution? Well, that was an 8-year battle. I lost in the labor courts. I lost in the labor appeal court. I lost in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, and finally I ended up in the Constitutional Court. An experience that I will forever cherish. And why I went up, right up to the Constitutional Court, is again because of this Constitution, which guarantees us that no matter whether you are poor, no matter whether you are uneducated, no matter whether you are rich, that the law applies equally to all of us. And even judges, because 7 judges found against me. It was very hard. People always ask me, why did you continue? And I said, because of the principle that what is good for Sistandi and Boet-Willem is good for me. What is bad for Peter and for Paul is bad for me. Equality. Equal rights. So when you face a challenge such as that which I faced, and you must decide whether you're going to fight or submit, that's a very important question to ask. Why do you want to fight? Would this fight also be a fight that Dick, Tom, and Harry would fight if this would have happened to them? And if your answer to that question is yes, then you must fight. But if the answer to this question is that no, it's just because you are special, you are Derrick Grootboom, therefore you must fight, but it would not be necessary for Dick, Tom, and Harry, then you must stop. Because then you are on the wrong track. What we must fight for is that which is good for everybody else. Because when we fight that fight, we are fighting also the fight for the other one. the good fight. Just as Nelson Mandela fought that fight, Walter Sisulu fought that fight. Martin Luther King fought that fight. When you fight that fight, you fight it not for yourself, you fight it for the principle. And that is how come I ended up in the Constitutional Court. And it was an amazing experience, and I must say, to walk there, and I took my wife with me, to walk there in that prison and to be in the court building. I wish all judges, all prosecutors, all policemen could go to the Constitutional Court and see how humble people are there, how respectful they are, how accommodating they are. I wish all courts in South Africa could become a court like the Constitutional Court. And I hope the Constitutional Court continue to grow in that respect, because that's where the buck stops, with the Constitutional Court. Yes, the judge who presided in the Labour Court, Judge Edwin Molaslehi, when he was shortlisted for a promotion, a higher post, I objected, because the judgment that he brought out, which caused me to lose my income and my work and my job for 8 years, 8 very hard years, that judgment, when I read that judgment, after he made his decision, the judgment was full of spelling mistakes, full of grammatical mistakes. It was a cut and paste job. It was clear that he could not have written this judgment. But it was very difficult for me to have people to understand, but there's something that went wrong here. And so I had to fight right up to the Constitutional Court. And so when I note that he was shortlisted, and that video is on YouTube, his interview for the JSC, by the JSC, the Judicial Service Commission, I objected. And I'm very grateful for Panyaza Lesufi, the MEC for Education in Gauteng, who asked the judge about my objection. And he acknowledged that he's sorry for what he did, that he himself, for a whole week before the interview, was grappling with this. What did he do? How did it come about? And so the lesson there is, again, that the Constitution is even higher than the judge or the magistrate. Our people should not be afraid to say in court to the magistrate, what you are saying there and how you are behaving there, Mr. Magistrate or Judge, if I read the Constitution here, it says equal rights. If you are late, when court's supposed to start 2 o'clock, when you are late, there's nothing wrong. You don't give us a reason why you are late. But when we are late and you are sitting on the bench, then we must answer you why we are late. The Constitution says we are all equal before the law. So you must give an explanation why you are late, Mr. Judge. You must give an explanation, Ms. Magistrate, why you are late. That is what our people should do. That is what the Constitution empowers you to do. To hold even judges to account.